All right, hello everyone, and welcome back to another video. With this one, we're gonna go with the MLB, and we're gonna go over the odds for Sunday, June the 1st. And let's get started with MLB. The first game is between St. Louis and Texas, the Rangers, Cardinals versus Rangers. And we're also gonna go through the splits, which is where the money is going. We're gonna go over that. We're gonna analyze the odds. And yeah, let's get started. All right. Cardinals start at plus 146 on the money line, minus 174 for Texas. They are above that 150 threshold. They're minus 150. Those hit more so in baseball than anything else, so you may want to pay attention to that because baseball relatively has lower odds than other sports in general. But spread is at naturally 1.5, also known as the run line in baseball. 1.5 points favoring the Rangers, 1.5 runs favoring the Rangers. And we're going to focus on this minus 142 cost for the plus 1.5 Cardinals. And that's going to be a huge indicator where the money is going with this minus 174 money line for the Rangers and minus 142 cost on the run line for the Cardinals. The over-under is relatively low at 7.5, minus 105 for the over, minus 115 for the under. And of course, as you know about these things, minus 105s hit more so than the minus 115s. So let's see where the money is going. All right. 58% in favor of the Cardinals on the run line. On the money line, that is, excuse me. On the money, 71% going with the Rangers on the betting. 68% of the betting going with the Rangers on the run line, and 65% of the money going with the Rangers on the run line. So people expecting the Rangers to pretty much sweep this. It looks like a good choice, especially with this minus 142 being so high at 35% of the Cardinals. Now you can argue that minus 142 at 35% money going with the Cardinals on the run line is a viable option, viable outcome for the bookies and the bettors. That could happen, and it makes a whole lot of sense. And 65% putting money on the plus 118 cost for the Rangers. And that also makes sense because the plus 118 is a relatively low compared to this minus 174 money line. So with 58% going there, it does kind of make sense. You could go with Texas across the board. This is one of those distant toss-ups, I call it, with this 35% in favor of this minus 142. Minus 142 is relatively high for a spread. That's like money line odds for baseball. Over is getting that minus 105 sweet spot, 7.5, but the total is relatively low at 7.5 runs. That is 61% going over, 72% of the betting going over. So people expecting a relatively higher scoring game. With these 7.5, those are tricky because that's relatively low, and that over is getting that minus 105 sweet spot. But I'm enticed to go with the under 7.5, but it's not a dominant. It's only 61% of the money, so the under looks like a viable choice. But as it currently stands with that minus 105 cost, pay attention to where those costs go. It looks like over could take it in that only as it currently stands. All right. Chicago versus Baltimore here, plus 142 to minus 168 cost. Minus 140 cost on the spread for Chicago, and minus 1.5 runs favoring Baltimore, that is, at plus 116 cost. Over under is at 9, relatively high, minus 112 cost. Going over, under is getting minus 108 on the total. All right, we're gonna focus on the minus 168. Let's see real quick. Let me scroll down. They got the All these games are starting at the same time, and that's why. All right, 49% of the money going with Chicago, 51% of the money going with Baltimore, 61% of the money on the run line going with Chicago, 39% of the money going with Baltimore on the run line. So it's about 50-50 of the money on right here on the money line. 72% of the betting is in favor of Baltimore, though. And 61% of the betting on the run line is in favor of Baltimore. But only 39% of the money. So people putting big money on the White Sox in this one. And it looks like that might be a viable choice. This could be one of those where Baltimore wins the money line, Chicago White Sox wins the spread. It just has all the indications of it. Over under is getting 46% of the money going over, 50-50 on the betting. So not sizable in either direction on the over under, but that under is getting, the over is getting that minus 112. I would go with the over in that one. All right, Boston versus Atlanta, minus 132 on the money line for Boston, plus 112 for Atlanta. 1.5 runs for Boston at plus 125 cost. 1.5 runs for Atlanta, plus 1.5 runs on the run line for the Braves at minus 150. They're at that minus 150 sweet spot on the run line. That's critical, because you could get a Boston here. They would make money hand over fist, but let's see where the money is going. 29% of the money going in favor of Boston. 71% of the money on the money line going in favor of the Atlanta Braves. And that looks like a decent pick. Atlanta looks like they're safe across the board here, especially because of this minus 150. But Boston is getting 80%, and they're pushing that minus 150 with 20%. All right, yeah, I would stick with Atlanta. Looks decent across the board only as the cost currently stands. If you see this minus 150 go down, then that's when you would need to consider a different option. Over under is at minus 115 cost going over 8. Under 8 is getting minus 105 costs. I'm going to go with the under and go with the 45% of the money going with Atlanta. Going with the under, excuse me, at that minus 105 sweet spot. Just keep that in mind. Those minus 105s hit with those totals more so than the minus 115s. All right, Milwaukee versus Philadelphia. Plus 150 for Milwaukee, minus 178 for Philadelphia. Run line, plus 1.5 at minus 140. 1.5 runs, minus 140 cost, that is. Minus 1.5 run favorite are the Phillies at plus 116 cost. Over under is at 8. Minus 120 going over, minus 102 going under. And naturally, the minus 120s hit more than the minus 102s. Keep that in mind. But we're going to focus on this minus 140 run line for the underdog Milwaukee Braves. Plus 150 on the money line for them. But that minus 178 is over that minus 150 threshold. So we'll keep that in mind. Let me scroll up. All right, 61% of the money in favor of Philly. Sorry about that. 61% of the money in favor of Philadelphia. 68% of the betting in favor of Philadelphia on the money line. 77% of the money in favor of Philadelphia on the run line. 72% of the betting in favor of Philly on the run line. So they're dominating the run line here, and they're a sizable. Oh, no, it's just plus 116. Okay, plus 116. That could work out with them winning the money line as well. 61% at that minus 178 threshold. One of the higher upper 100 total odds of the day, excuse me. Philadelphia looks safe here across the board, but that minus 140 is relatively high. It's only getting 23% of the money. And that 77% is enticing with that minus 116. So this could be one of those things where Milwaukee Brewers could win the spread, and 61% of the right here of the money going in favor of Philly. That could hold up at that minus 178 money line here. And and I would join them going with the over, only as these odds currently stand. Obviously, this is a few hours before the opening pitch. Over under is at 8, minus 120 cost going over. So keep that in mind. And that is getting 64% going over. And that's a high threshold to give up. That's a lot of money to give up for the bookies. So it looks like that could hold up. All right, Oakland versus Toronto, plus 166 in favor of Oakland, minus 198 in favor of Toronto on the money line, that is. Spread run line is at plus 1.5, Oakland at minus 134 cost. Minus 1.5 run favorites are the Blue Jays at plus 112 cost. Let's see where the money is. Well, over under is at 8.5. Minus plus 100 going over, minus 122 going under. Minus 122, but that plus 100 is going to dictate everything because that's what breaks even right there. But that minus 122 at under 8.5 is going to be hard to go against. Let me scroll down. All right, 81% in favor of the Blue Jays on the money, 94% in favor of the Blue Jays on the run line. Over under is at 8.5, 82% going over, only 18% going under. That's why I say focus on those keys. That over looks enticing at that plus 100, even though the minus 122s hit slightly more often. But these dictate, the plus 100s dictate where the money is going on the totals. So look out for those when you get them, when you see them, when you bet on them. 82% going in favor of that over. I would join the public in that instance, but this minus 198, I would join the public in that instance as well. And Toronto plus 112 cost. Join them across the board in that one. All right, the Angels, Los Angeles Angels versus the Cleveland Guardians, plus 144 are the odds for the Angels on the money line. Minus 172 are the odds for the Guardians on the money line. Plus 1.5 and minus 152 is the spread for the Angels. The Guardians are at minus 1.5 at plus 126. This minus 152 is over that minus 150 threshold, and those are very difficult to go against on the money line or the run lines in baseball. Over under is at 8, and the over is getting minus 118 cost, and the under is getting minus 104. All right, and that over is getting 89% of the money. I would join the public on that total as well. Minus 172 on the money line is 79% and 81% on the run line. All right, this could be one of those situations where LA gets the run line, Cleveland gets the money line. Everything looks like it's going to hold up that way. And these odds have increased for the Guardians as well. There's plus 126, and they're getting, well, minus 126, that is. No, plus 126. Plus 126 odds for the Guardians on the run line, and they're getting 81%. Those have increased despite them increasing to the 81%, which is why I don't think that's going to happen. But Cleveland could still win the game, and LA gets the run line. So keep that in mind. Colorado versus New York Mets, plus 330. Let me scroll down. Plus 330 for, let me scroll back up. Plus 330 for the Colorado Rockies, who are not doing so hot this season, but they could be a good money team to bet on if you bet on them at the right time. Minus 420 for the Mets on the money line there. Plus 150 for the cost for the Rockies at 1.5 run line. 1.5 favorites are the Mets at home at minus 182 cost. So they're getting 100% right here, as you can see on the run line. 100% of the money and 97% of the betting. By the way, these are based off global sportsbook averages. That is how they get this data on SBD. 94% going with the Mets on the money line at this 420 right here. So with that being said, let's see, 100 here, 94 here. only 6%. You could take this risk and go with Colorado across the board. Eventually, you're going to get paid if you pick Colorado, especially if you don't put too much money on them initially, but then hit them at the right given times, and that's what I'm here for. 8.5-point total. Under is getting 67% of the money, and I would join the public there and go with the under. And always beware of home favorites. Always beware of massive home favorites. Just keep that in mind. Always beware of massive home favorites. All right, San Francisco versus Miami. Minus 130 cost for the Giants on the money line there. Plus 110 for Miami. Plus 130 on the run line for the Giants. And the underdog Miami at plus 1.5 at minus 156 cost. Minus 156 cost on the spread. Let's see. Let me scroll down here. That is only getting 16% is Miami on the run line. Let me scroll down a little bit more. 84% going in favor of San Francisco, as well as on the money line as well. 130 right here, that is not sizable. Not a very sizable margin right there. So look out for that. But I would go with Miami across the board here at home. Just because of this minus 156, it's above that 150 threshold. Plus 110 cost. That wouldn't be a whole lot to pay out at all. And it's only 16% of the money as well. Over under is at 8. Under is getting that minus 122 cost. Over is getting that even 100. 63% going with the over. The odds have, as you can see, they went from 7 to 7.5 to 8. So they are increasing. They're trying to entice you to bet the under when they do that. Trying to entice you to bet the under when they do that. If you see these odds here, they're at 37% now. But if you see that cost go, that money percentage, if you see that increase while these odds stay right here at minus 122, then go with the over. But as it currently stands, go with the under, that minus 122. But go with that over. Pay attention to that over, though. That's going to dictate where you want to go. The cost on that over, that is. That's going to dictate where you need to go in that instance. All right, Detroit versus Kansas City. Plus 126 for Detroit, minus 148 for Kansas City. On the money line, minus 166 cost for Detroit on the spread. Plus 138 cost for Kansas City on the spread at minus 1.5. 1.5 run favorites are the Royals. Over under is at 8.5 at minus 122 cost. Let's see where the money is going. 55% in favor of Detroit on the money line. 37% in favor of Detroit on the run line. That could happen. That looks legit. They're above that minus 150, but pay attention to that Kansas City. They're minus 148. Pay attention to that, and they're getting 46% of the money here, so that looks dangerous right there. But that could happen, Detroit getting this across the board, but look out for Kansas City in this run line. If they go above 150 or at 150, they look pretty safe on the money line. Detroit, that minus 166 on the run line, I would go with that one. And the over-under is at 8.5, plus 100 even on the over. At 38%, 62% at that minus 122. That's going to be hard to ignore. Go with the under 8.5, but they're probably trying to get you to do that anyway. That minus 122 cost at 62%. That's a lot of money to miss out on if they're not going to do it like that. For the bookies, that is. For the bookies. I'm thinking like a bookie so that you could get how they pretty much dupe the public. But yeah, let's go on to Tampa Bay versus Houston. Plus 168 for Tampa Bay, minus 200 for Houston. Plus 1.5 and minus 128 cost for the Rays. Minus 1.5 at plus 108 cost for the Astros. Over under is at 7.5. Minus 105 going over Under is getting minus 115, as you know, minus 105s hit more so than the minus 115s on the totals especially. All right, minus 200 of the Astros at home. And that cost on the run line is plus 128. All right, minus 200. Let's see. 66% going with that minus 200 money line for Houston. Looks pretty safe. 78% going with Houston. Houston looks safe across the board based off these percentages and where the odds are going. Over under is at 7.5. I would join the public and go with that over and join that minus 105 sweet spot as well. Now the under could take it only if it's such a low total. It's such a low total, and the low total is only getting 10%. That's where it gets dangerous. But I would join the public only because of that minus 105 sweet spot in this instance, and it's a low total, very low total. So, all right, Cincinnati versus Chicago. The Cubs won the last game, plus 140 for Cincinnati, minus 168 for Chicago, plus 1.5 run line for the Cincinnati Reds at minus 160 cost, minus 1.5 run line at plus 132 cost for the Chicago Cubs. Over under is at 7.5 once again, minus 112 sweet spot for the Reds and for the over, that is. Under 7.5 at minus 108 on the total there. Let's see where the money is going. Let me go down. All right. 81% going with the Cubs on the money line, 88% going with the Cubs. This money on the run line. 81 money line, 88 run line for the Cincinnati Reds. For the Cubs, that is. The Reds are at plus 140, and they're only getting 19% of that. Let's see. Run line is at minus 160 for Cincinnati. 88% trying to get this money here. It is low, but it doesn't look likely. That minus 160 could take it across the board. Plus 140 right there. It's only getting 19%. Now, Cincinnati could win this across the board. I think they're going to get the run line here. But they could win this across the board based off of this alone. Minus 168 for the Cubs at 81%. If you see this 81% increase at all, go with Cincinnati. By game time, that is. Go with Cincinnati. Over under 7.5. Over is getting a minus 112. I would fade the public and go under in this instance and go with that minus 108 threshold. Under 7.5. They've dropped it down from 8 to 7.5. Now it is 7.5. They're trying to get you to go over. And that's what a lot of people are betting on. I'm going against that and going with the under in this instance. Washington versus Arizona. Plus 200 for Washington, minus 245 for Arizona. Plus 1.5 and minus 110 cost for Washington. Minus 1.5 and minus 111 cost for Arizona. So, yep, minus 111 and minus 110. And it's something you rarely see, especially competing spreads right there like that. But minus 245 for the home team. Let's see where the money is going. All right, 68% going in favor of Arizona. This minus 245 looks safe right there. Minus 111 is 96% going with Arizona on this right here. Minus 111, minus 110 there. And that is only getting 4%. I would go at Arizona on the ML, and with that 96%, that's very, very, very difficult to go against. 96% here. And they're in the negatives too. So that minus 111 there. I would fade the public and go with Washington on the run line there. Over under is at 9 plus 100 going over, minus 122. Pretty much how it's been most of today. Going under. All right, 96% going with the over in that instance. And a lot of people expecting a higher scoring game. So I would expect that to happen as well. I would go with the over. That 9. 9 is relatively high as well. But watch how they adjust. If it goes up to 9.5, go with the over for sure. If it goes below 8.5, go with the under. All right, next game. Let me scroll down. All right, that is it after that. All right, Minnesota versus Seattle. Plus 114 for Minnesota, minus 134 for Seattle. On the money line, that is. Plus 1.5 for Minnesota at minus 184 cost on the run line. Minus 1.5 for Seattle at plus 152 on the run line for Seattle. Over under is at 7.5, minus 115 going over, minus 105 going under. In this one, I'll start with the total. As you can see, the minus 105 is getting only 15%. I would fade the public in that instance. I would fade the public on the total in that instance. And it's getting that minus 105 sweet spot. But 67% of the run line money on the run line going with Seattle. 57% of the betting going with Seattle. 54% going with Minnesota on the money line. 54% going with Minnesota on the money line. Therefore, you have to go with them on the money line as well. And I would go with Minnesota across the board here. It just makes more sense. And let's go to Pittsburgh and San Diego. Plus 116 for Pittsburgh, minus 134 for San Diego. Minus 134 for San Diego is... Oh, let me scroll down. %19 of the money going with Pittsburgh, 81% going with San Diego. All right. Minus 134 for San Diego. Let's see. 81% going with San Diego, minus 134. Minus 184 here for Pittsburgh at only 10%. 90% going in favor of San Diego. So it's 81 here and 90 here. And it's 90 here. So hang on. All right, there we go. All right. So 8.5 is the total at minus 104 cost for the over. Under is getting 8.5 at minus 118 cost. Let's see where the money is going in that one. 38% of the betting going in favor of Pittsburgh. 34% going in favor of Pittsburgh on the money. 66 in favor of the over, that is. Under is getting 66%. I'm fading the public and I'm joining the public and going with the under. Under 8.5 in that one. And Pittsburgh, let's see, they're only getting 19 and 10. I would go with Pittsburgh across the board in that one. All right, Yankees versus Dodgers. Plus 146. This was had much higher odds yesterday. But they've dropped significantly. Plus 146 for the Yankees, minus 174 for the Dodgers on the money line at home. Minus 137 on the run line for the Yankees. Plus 114 for the run line on the Dodgers. Over-unders at 9. Minus 105 cost going with the over. Minus 115 cost going with the under. And let's see where the money's going. Dodgers are above that minus 150 threshold. Let's see. All right. 52% going in favor of the Dodgers there. 76% going in favor of the Dodgers on the spread. They're minus 137. That's not really relatively high or something to worry about. 22% going in favor of the Yankees. Over under 9. Minus 105 cost going with the over. Minus 115 going under. 79% of the money going with the over. 28% going with the under. All right, I would join the public on the total and go with the over, especially since the total's so high. I would join the public and it's getting that minus 105 threshold, the one that hits more so than that. Minus 174 for the Dodgers. They're above that minus 150. 52%. Yeah, I would go with the Dodgers on the ML, but the spread, minus 137 going with the Yankees. Minus 1.5 going with the Dodgers. So people expecting Dodgers to win this one handily. I would go with the Yankees on the spread or the run line in this one, but the Dodgers on the ML. Yeah, that's how I would do that. But yeah, I will see you guys in the next video. You guys take care. I've been Scott. Pray every day. And join the Patreon. Link is in the description. And yeah, I'll see you guys later. You guys take care.